The Jedi, keepers of the peace, bastions of light, and warriors of morality. Or at least, that's what they want you to believe. A look at the Jedi's history reveals a startling truth, one that is not so noble or pure, bordering upon the very dark side they sought to destroy. Join us as we explore some of the worst atrocities of the Jedi Order, from the war crimes of the Clone Wars to the destruction of entire planets in the name of peace and the greater good. But before we start, I'd like to thank Joel McMahon for suggesting this video. Your name will be entered into the VF Saber Giveaway draw. Be sure to comment your lore questions, what ifs etc. down below for a chance to have your idea made into a video and to have your name entered into the giveaway draw. Anyway, on with the video. Perhaps the most notable and well-known reason why the Jedi were not as honourable as is often believed is because of the many war crimes their members committed. In fact, there were so many, an entire video dedicated to this topic is likely needed. But perhaps of greatest note is the Jedi's methods of enhanced interrogation. A particularly harrowing example of this contradiction is evidenced by Anakin Skywalker's treatment of Poggle the Lesser. Held captive, Poggle becomes the target of Anakin's aggression during a physical assault that escalates to the use of Force choke. The treatment of prisoners of war in this way is highly morally questionable, even if it was for the seeming greater good. This kind of violent interrogation could be excused as it was done by Anakin Skywalker, a renegade Jedi who ultimately fell to the dark side, thus absolving the Jedi as a whole of responsibility. However, it is not solely under Anakin's hand that such actions unfolded. This story is further complicated by the involvement of esteemed Jedi Council members such as Obi-Wan Kenobi and Mace Windu. In their quest to uncover the whereabouts of a hidden holocron, these Jedi leaders unite their formidable powers to exert an overwhelming Jedi mind power on the bounty hunter Cad Bane. This coercive strategy teeters on the very edge of violating Bane's mental integrity, exerting such force that it threatens to shatter his mind unless he capitulates. The fact that the Jedi Order's second in command not only knew about such violent actions towards prisoners of war, but also partook in them, shows just how far the Jedi had fallen. Another controversial tactic recurrently employed by the Jedi throughout the Clone Wars is the practice of feigning surrender during combat. This strategy, known in the realms of international law and warfare ethics as perfidy, directly contravenes the principles laid out in the Geneva Convention. In one notable instance during the Battle of Christophsis, a cunning ploy is orchestrated by Jedi Master Obi-Wan Kenobi. In an effort to halt the progression of hostilities and buy time, Kenobi pretends to surrender. This deliberate act of deception serves a dual purpose. It momentarily halts the enemy's advance and provides a crucial window for Anakin Skywalker alongside his newly appointed apprentice Ahsoka Tano to undertake a daring mission to disable the Separatist ray shield. Another instance of perfidy is executed by Anakin Skywalker in a strategic maneuver above the planet of Ryloth. In a bold and desperate gambit, Anakin presents the illusion of surrendering a crippled Venator-class Star Destroyer. This feint deceives the Separatist blockade into allowing the Republic vessel to approach perilously close. In a dramatic culmination, Anakin's ship rams through the enemy lines, annihilating the Trade Federation's command ship in a spectacular explosion, and paving the way for the Republic forces to deploy ground troops onto the war-torn planet. The ethical quandaries surrounding the Jedi's conduct during the Clone Wars extends far beyond their interrogation methods and strategic deceptions. A striking example of the moral complexities faced by the Jedi is illustrated in the actions of Ki-Adi-Mundi, a revered member of the Jedi Council. His directive for the clone troopers under his command to deploy flamethrowers against sentient beings starkly highlights the erosion of the Jedi's moral compass amidst the fog of war. The use of such a brutal and indiscriminate weapon, especially against sentient lifeforms, starkly contrasts with the Jedi Code, which espouses respect for all life and the pursuit of peace. Flamethrowers, by their very nature, inflict not only lethal damage, but also unimaginable suffering on their targets, raising serious ethical questions about the means deployed in this war and the extent to which the Jedi have strayed from their foundational principles. The use of war crimes and unethical weaponry does not only include the Clone Wars. As we've detailed in the Star Wars Legends timeline, many Jedi under the command of Revan were more than happy to make highly unethical decisions if it meant giving them an edge over Mandalore the Ultimate during the Mandalorian Wars. This line of thinking culminated in the use of the Mass Shadow Generator. In an attempt to annihilate the remainder of the Mandalorian fleet, the Republic and the Revan-Kissed Jedi opted to destroy an entire planet with this superweapon. In the midst of battle, Mitra Surik silently deployed the weapon. Shortly thereafter, a massive gravity vortex emerged, forcibly pulling a large number of ships from both fleets out of orbit. This vortex was so potent that it compressed innumerable vessels into the crust of the planet and shattered Malachor 5 down to its core. Mandalorians, Jedi, and countless civilians were all killed as a result of Revan and his Jedi allies' efforts to stop the Mandalorian Wars. Jedi practices regarding civilians extended further than simply regarding them as collateral damage during the Old Republic era. Particularly during the New Sith Wars, the Jedi were known to steal children from their parents in order to induct them into the Order. The Jedi justified this as they believed that if they had not forcibly taken these children, they would fall into the hands of the Sith. Although the Jedi were banned from doing this when the Sith Order was seemingly vanquished, they still continued to do some very morally questionable things regarding children. The most notable example of this was the baby Ludi case. Following a devastating groundquake that annihilated the capital city of Dontry in 23 BBY, a team of Jedi rescuers discovered an infant girl, Ludi Belaine, miraculously surviving amidst the ruins. Believing her to be orphaned, they took her to Coruscant for Jedi training. However, this story took a dramatic turn when Ludi's mother, Javanna Belaine, was found alive a month later. This sparked a highly publicized legal battle as the mother fought to reclaim her daughter from the Jedi Order. Despite the public outcry and Javanna Belaine appearing on a talk show that was seen by billions of viewers, the Jedi Council refused her petition. They argued that reintegrating the child with her family was too perilous, given her exposure to the Force. The situation escalated with demonstrations by the People's Inquest and a thwarted attempt by students to storm the Jedi Temple. Yet despite this, the Council remained unmoved, maintaining their stance despite this controversy. Quite clearly then, the Jedi were still in the business of stealing babies from their mothers, even during the lead up to the Clone Wars. This kind of disregard for civilians and their feelings was deeply rooted in Jedi elitism, a surprisingly prominent school of thought within the Jedi Order. Many such as Dooku, Jorah Sabayath and countless others believed that ordinary people were stupid and narrow-minded, with the Jedi being the only ones wise enough to rule over the Republic. An example of this disregard for non-Force sensitives is seen with the use of the Jedi mind trick.
Let me see your identification.
You don't need to see his identification.
We don't need to see his identification.
These aren't the droids you're looking for.
These aren't the droids we're looking for.
He can go about his business.
You can go about your business.
Move along.
Move along. Move along.
As demonstrated in The Phantom Menace, even noble Jedi like Qui-Gon were willing to use it against random civilians in order to get what they wanted, undermining the galactic civilians' agency and free will. Thus, it must be asked, how many mothers were separated from their children due to the use of this highly unethical mind control trick? The use of techniques that subjugated other individuals to the will of the Jedi was also extended to members of their own order. In an upcoming video, we will be exploring the secret Jedi prison for those who had crossed the Jedi Council. But in short, these individuals were confined in a stasis field and subjected to round-the-clock Jedi mind tricks in an effort to make them more docile and obedient. Such extreme measures against those perceived to be heretics was a common occurrence. The first such example in history was the Jedi's treatment of the Legions of Leto. The Legions of Leto were formed by the followers of Zendor, a Jedi which turned away from the Order due to his criticisms of their restrictive teachings of the Force. Zendor, advocating for a more inclusive understanding of the Force, incorporated teachings from various Force traditions including the Order of the Dai Bendu, the Followers of Palawa, the Kashir Mer Guardians of Breath, the Barando, and the Chartos Academy. His academy on Leto initially attracted a modest following, but it swiftly grew as more and more were drawn into his philosophy. This burgeoning interest alarmed the Jedi Order, leading to significant tensions. Historical accounts suggest that it was the Jedi who first mobilized for conflict, prompting Xendor, albeit reluctantly, to assume the role of general and launch a direct assault on Ossus. This act ignited a galaxy-wide war, marking a tumultuous period where Xendor's forces clashed with the Jedi. The war ultimately concluded with Xendor's death and the subsequent pursuit and elimination of his followers by the Jedi, aiming to extinguish the dissent he had sparked. A similar example can be seen with the early Dark Jedi who would eventually become the first Sith Lords. Learning from the ancient teachings of Xendor, at first these Jedi turned towards more unorthodox Force techniques such as manipulation of animals and healing powers, as they believed that the galaxy was still rife with poverty, suffering, and fear. They thought that the Jedi were too isolationist, only ever reacting to threats rather than preventing them by using their powers. Again though, the Jedi saw them as dangerous heretics, and war quickly broke out. Outnumbered and desperate, these idealistic young Jedi heretics increasingly relied on the dark side during the forthcoming 100-year darkness, eventually leading to the creation of the Sith. As you can see, the Jedi, through their dogma and strict isolationist stance, inadvertently created their greatest enemies. Their steadfast refusal to use their powers to significantly help the civilians of the galaxy, ultimately resulting in war and the rise of the Sith. We will now move on to some of the most egregious actions of the Jedi, atrocities so horrific they are comparable with many of the worst crimes of Palpatine's empire. The first of these atrocities took place a few years before the Clone Wars, during the Huck War. The Huck War, also referred to as the Yamri Crisis, stands as a dark chapter in galactic history. This prolonged conflict unfolded between the proud and resilient Kaleesh of Kali and the technologically advanced insectoid species known as the Huck. Over generations, the conflict simmered and erupted on multiple fronts, fueled by the Huck's relentless expansion and their relentless colonization of neighboring planets. Their campaign of conquest eventually led them to Kali, where they enslaved millions of Kaleesh, who were then sold into bondage across the galaxy. The Kaleesh, though, were a people defined by their indomitable spirit, and they refused to succumb to the yoke of oppression. From the ashes of despair and subjugation rose a fierce resistance, marking the beginning of a brutal struggle for liberation. This uprising was spearheaded by two legendary Kaleesh warriors, whose names would forever echo in the halls of history, Kwaiman J. Shilau and his wife Rondura Kumar. Together they became the embodiment of the people's wrath, leading devastating campaigns against the Huck, elevating them to the status of near mythological figures. However, in a tragic turn of events, Kumar fell in battle, a loss so great that it shattered Shilau to his core. Shilau took up 10 new wives to try and cope with this loss, but no one could replace his beloved Kumar. Consumed by grief and rage, Shilau cast aside his former identity to become known simply as Grievous. Grievous then embarked on a relentless campaign against the Huck, driving them from Kali and neighbouring worlds. However, the Kaleesh's counteroffensive prompted the Huck to seek intervention from the Galactic Republic. Utilizing their connections with the Trade Federation, the Huck presented a distorted account of the conflict, portraying themselves as innocent victims of Kaleesh aggression. Thus, the Republic and Jedi intervened on behalf of the Huck. The Republic and the Jedi then imposed severe sanctions on Kali and demanded reparations from the Kaleesh for their supposed aggression. These measures led to economic collapse on Kali, plunging Grievous and his people into a dire crisis. Grievous was forced to witness the unbearable. His 10 wives, offspring, and millions of Kaleesh, once proud and indomitable, now succumbed to hunger and eventually death. Amidst this turmoil, the Huck continued their incursions into Kaleesh territory, exploiting the weakened state of their adversaries. The Republic, though, turned a blind eye to these transgressions, maintaining their sanctions and effectively abandoning the Kaleesh to their fate. This indifference and the inaction by the Republic and its Jedi enforcers sowed the seeds of a deep resentment within Grievous, which would ultimately result in him leading the CIS into battle against the Republic and Jedi. Another example of the Jedi creating their own enemies through their own actions pertains to the Mandalorians. Indeed, the Jedi's treatment of the Kaleesh pales in comparison to their annihilation of the Mandalorian people. As already discussed, throughout history, the Jedi in their purported quest for peace and serenity have often met ideological threats with uncompromising force. From the legions of Leto to the Dark Jedi, all who stood opposed to the Jedi's interpretation of the Force were met with the lethal edge of a lightsaber. The Mandalorians, despite not entirely aligning with the dark side, were not exempt from the Jedi High Council's wrath. After the devastation wrought on the Mandalorians by Revan during the Old Republic era, the Mandalorians began to slowly recover their power during the New Sith Wars, allying with the Jedi against the Sith on many occasions. Near the end of the New Sith Wars, around 1,050 years before the destruction of the Death Star, a new leader known as Mandalore the Uniter emerged, sparking a movement dubbed the Return. He revitalized Mandalorian industry, united the fractious clans, and extended protection to neighboring sectors, marking a profound resurgence of Mandalorian influence within the galaxy. After the Sith were seemingly defeated, the Mandalorians' growing power and independence caused tensions to rise with the Republic. The Mandalorians' refusal to demilitarize, their economic and defense pacts with neighboring sectors, and their increased taxation along vital hyperspace routes were seen as direct challenges to Republic dominance. In 738 BBY, the Republic, led by Jedi generals, launched a devastating assault on Mandalorian space, targeting key worlds including Mandalore itself. The attack left Mandalore's lush landscapes scorched and barren, forcing many Mandalorians into exile or under the yoke of Republic occupation. The aftermath of this attack, known as the Annihilation, saw the Mandalorians stripped of their cultural armor and forced into domed cities on their now uninhabitable world. A Republic-friendly government was forcibly installed, and they were fully integrated into the Republic. This kind of preemptive strike against a growing power is hardly moral or just. The Mandalorians during this time were not violently expansionist, nor had they attacked the Republic. The Jedi were simply carrying out the bidding of a corrupt and dominant hegemon, fearful of a rising power, an act that decimated Mandalore's surface for centuries, killed millions, and reduced a once proud culture to almost nothing. What's worse, this act occurred during Master Yoda's lifetime. While it is unknown whether he was Grand Master, he likely would have attained the rank of Master by this point, suggesting that he may have been involved with this horrific action. But by far the worst of the Jedi atrocities has to be the Republic's counter-invasion of the Sith Empire. This act was so horrific that even later Jedi historians would regret it as one of the Order's worst mistakes. This event occurred in the aftermath of the Great Hyperspace War, an event we explored in more depth over on the Complete Star Wars Legends timeline. But for those of you who missed that episode, here is a quick reminder of what that conflict entailed. 5 millennia prior to the era marked by the Clone Wars, the galaxy was thrust into an era of unparalleled conflict and upheaval, only really comparable with the Clone Wars and the Old Sith Wars. This was not merely a few skirmishes or series of isolated engagements, but a monumental war that spanned the breadth of the galaxy, pitting the Republic and the Jedi against the formidable Sith Empire. The genesis of this catastrophic conflict can be traced back to an accidental discovery. 2 Republic explorers venturing into the uncharted territories of space found themselves on Korriban, the ancient and sacred homeworld of the Sith. This period was already one of great instability within the Sith Empire that was reeling from the loss of their great ruler Marka Ragnos and the subsequent power struggle that ensued. The contenders for the throne, Ludo Crash and Naga Sadow, were locked in a bitter and unforgiving contest for supremacy. Naga Sadow, a Sith Lord of unparalleled ambition and cunning, perceived the accidental arrival of the Republic explorers not as a mere chance, but as an opportunity to be exploited. The Sith, inherently distrustful of outsiders and bearing the scars of countless invasions prior, were easily swayed by Sadow's machinations. He masterfully manipulated the situation, framing the explorers as spies and orchestrating their dramatic escape to appear as an act of aggression by the Republic. With this single calculated move, Sadow ignited the flames of war, rallying the Sith under his banner and swiftly dealing with his rival Ludo Crash. Despite the initial success of the Sith under Sadow's leadership, their inherent discord and ambition would be their undoing. The Republic, seizing upon the internal strife of the Sith, managed to drive them back, all the way to Sith space. But the cessation of the Great Hyperspace War did not herald peace for the Sith species. Rather, it ushered in an era of suffering marked by internal strife, widespread poverty, and famine that mercilessly affected the civilian population. In the aftermath, the Sith found themselves in a position of extreme vulnerability, a shadow of their former might. Yet, despite their weakened state, the Republic's Senate, driven by a thirst for vengeance, clamoured for retribution. Under the guise of targeting the Sith elite and purportedly liberating the Sith citizens from their tyrannical rulers, Chancellor Poltemo sanctioned a joint task force comprised both of Republic and Jedi forces. Subsequently, they launched devastating assaults on the remnants of the Sith Empire. This invasion was ruthless in its execution, leading to the obliteration of key military installations and the annihilation of cities across numerous Sith-aligned worlds. Amidst this chaos, a particularly grim fate befell many Sith refugees, including women and children, who were subjected to a harrowing and excruciating Jedi ritual known as the Wall of Light, which stripped them of their connection to the Force. This ritual is well known to be so painful that it can often lead to insanity. Faced with the prospect of this fate, many Sith chose exile or death. The Republic and Jedi's campaign of destruction did not stop at physical devastation. In a symbolic gesture of eradicating the Sith culture and history, they obliterated holocrons, monuments of Sith leaders, and entire libraries of knowledge, attempting to erase the Sith legacy from the galaxy. This act of cultural desecration cemented the Sith conviction that the Jedi and Republic sought not just their defeat, but their total annihilation. And despite the Jedi's campaign being framed as helping the Sith to overthrow their dark side elites, this truly did ring hollow. After torturing thousands with the Wall of Light and obliterating entire cities, the Jedi and Republic left the Sith to their fate with no aid, leading to further misery, starvation, and ruin. And as was the case with the Jedi's atrocities on Mandalore and Kaleesh, this action would again help create one of their most formidable enemies. Amidst the despair on Korriban, a beacon of hope appeared. A mysterious message proliferated across the Sith holonet. The message promised salvation through a complex ritual that would eradicate their enemies once and for all. Desperation, fueled by their relentless persecution they had faced, drove many Sith to seek out the origins of this promise. Tragically, this glimmer of hope was nothing but an elaborate deception masterminded by the cunning Sith Lord Vitiate. In a horrific twist, the ritual he proposed used the life force of his own people as the price for his own immortality. Those that remained were taken with Vitiate, their minds twisted with hatred for what the Jedi had done to them. A millennia later, under Vitiate's immortal guidance, the Sith Empire would rise from the ashes, more formidable than ever. It would go on to conquer vast parts of the Republic, culminating in a bold and devastating assault on Coruscant itself. Thus, even amongst Jedi historians, the Republic's counter-invasion of Korriban would be remembered as one of the low points in Jedi history. But as detailed in this video, it was not really learned from, with the Jedi taking part in countless horrific actions over the millennia. This history is partly why many embraced Order 66 and the rise of the new Empire. This was particularly the case amongst the clone commandos, who held a deep hatred for Mace Windu in particular. To find out why, check out this video.